Hello, welcome back to Bonaventure Time. Today I want to take a dive into the questions of aesthetics, particularly one important question, which is beauty objective? Now, this is a question that I actually would love to say is self-evident, but many have been persuaded into saying that beauty is subjective. I personally hold beauty is objective, and I hope to give a convincing argument or present the arguments of great aestheticians on why beauty is objective. But before I get into their arguments, I want to actually talk about probably the most convincing argument for why beauty is subjective. And it's given by David Hume. And Hume takes note of a few things. And I'll mention something that he mentions before I run his main argument. And he notes, along with many others before him, like Immanuel Kant, the skeptics, that people just have different tastes in beauty, in regard to beauty. Like, one person finds classical music beautiful, the other finds it wholly distasteful. One person loves this kind of style, while another person finds another style more beautiful, right? And I think we can all attest to, right, having different preferences for different things, right? So they run with this and say, well, beauty is really just a subjective thing then that we find, right? My taste for this music is subjective, which is true. And your taste for that is your own subjective view. And beauty is nothing other than just a subjective feeling, as we'll see Hume really emphasizes, which is something many others have emphasized in their views of beauty being subjective. So that's something Hume takes note of, and he makes this argument in his inquiry on moral principles, in his Appendix 1, I believe, on moral sentiment is what it's called. And he gives this famous example of a circle. And he asks the question, where do you find objective value within the circle? Where do you find beauty? And it's a trick question from him, because it's actually, for him, you don't. Beauty is not to be found within the circle, because reason is the only thing that really gives you matters of fact, something objective, so to speak, although objective is kind of weird when you talk about Hume, because he's an indirect realist. But anyway, an objective, right, something disclosed of reality, right? Reason only grants us matters of fact, and so it only understands really the geometrical facts about the circle. Now, beauty is only found, Hume says, when an impression is made on the mind, on the sentiment, right? When a feeling is elicited and is impressed on the mind. But sentiment is not cognitive. It's not a cognitive act. Therefore, it discloses nothing of reality, and therefore beauty is nothing but a subjective feeling, not found in objective reality. That's his argument, right? And I've actually found many people to find this convincing. And I have to admit, it's a pretty persuasive argument. However, I find it flawed, and I hope to show why. I followed the line of thought of, well, a few people: Etienne Gilson, Jacques Maritain, Dietrich von Hildebrand, I think, is one of the greatest aestheticians, really, in all of philosophy, but certainly Michel de Freyne and Martin Heidegger and Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine are wonderful at it. But what is the claim that beauty is objective? Well, I'm going to focus more on von Hildebrand's critiques of Hume's argument, as I find them the most convincing. So there's two main objections that can be made. One is, well, if beauty is nothing but a feeling, this is actually nonsensical to say, right? Because if I look upon a landscape, right, and say, right, I'm taking Hume's view and I say, oh, beauty is nothing but a feeling, then the landscape's not what's beautiful, right? Because it's not objectively beautiful. There's only a subjective dimension to beautiful, but it's sublime. But then you'd be saying, my feeling is sublime. But that's kind of nonsensical, right? To just say, oh, I have this sublime feeling. No, what you have is something in reality that is affecting you, right? And so, really what Hildebrand wants to show kind of through this way is saying that it's kind of nonsensical to say that my feeling is sublime, that my feeling is beautiful, right? Because that's really what you're saying, if beauty is just a subjective feeling impressed on the mind, that I just have this sublime, beautiful feeling, right? No, there is an intrinsic beauty to this landscape that you're viewing, or to this painting that you're viewing, right? It elicits a feeling. Hildebrand does not deny that. But it seems nonsensical to say that that feeling's beautiful or sublime, especially when you're in a sublime experience, which I believe most of us have felt And I think if you reflect on certain beautiful experiences you've had, you would, I think, see the truth of this. But if you're not convinced by that, Hildebrand in his phenomenology comes to talk about an objective meaning to beauty, right? Because if you look at it in intentionality, right, this is the phenomenological term for consciousness of something, right? We come to Hildebrand's two ideas of consciousness, what he calls frontal consciousness and lateral consciousness. Frontal consciousness is basically intentionality as I've presented it in other videos, consciousness of something. So he says we become frontally conscious of beautiful things, right? I am conscious of a beautiful painting. I am conscious of the landscape, right? Now, lateral consciousness is the self-reflection of my consciousness of something. So instead of just saying I'm conscious of the chair in front of me, lateral consciousness would be I am thinking of myself being conscious of the chair in front of me, right? And through lateral consciousness, through this self-reflection, right, we can come to understand the meaning of things, right? So Hildebrand uses the example in his Aesthetics, Volume 1, if you want to reference for where I'm getting this from. He talks about the frontal consciousness of a beloved, right? You are conscious of a beloved person. But he talks about lateral consciousness is what leads you to not just be conscious of someone you love, but you come to actually know what it means to be in love, right? Because you're self-reflecting, you're actually understanding the meaning of love, right? Not just being conscious of the beloved. But Hildebrand notes that with beauty, it has this certain mystery to it, because we can't have lateral consciousness with beauty, right? We can self-reflect and be conscious of ourselves being conscious of a beautiful object. It's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, right, we don't know the meaning of beauty. And you might find that kind of shocking, but if you read over 2,000 years of philosophy, right, all the philosophers have actually come to agree with this, that we don't know the meaning of beauty, really, right? Right, you can posit theological answers, right, and I'm not saying that they're not untrue, that, right, there's people who said beauty leads us to the good, or that's kind of a Platonic idea. Plato talks about that in his Symposium. I made a video on that. Right, but what Hildebrand means is that we can't really come to fully understand the full essence of beauty, right? The example I've heard from a great friend who, I think it's a wonderful example, right, beauty cannot be fully comprehended or possessed, and the example that my friend likes to use is, think of the stars, right? The stars are mesmerizing, but part of what makes them mesmerizing is the fact that we don't possess them, is that there's a mystery to them. And the moment we possess the stars, right, there's a certain, that mystery, that certain beauty is eliminated, right? Right, so beauty has this mysterious character to it. It's like a gift, too, right? What makes it exciting to open a present? It's the fact that it's a mystery. You don't know what it is, you know? When someone just hands you something, right, there's a certain excitement that's lacking in that presentation of the gift. And beauty is very much like this. It has this gift character, and Hildebrand loves to emphasize that. And so what that means, though, is that we can't fully comprehend beauty. And so it's something outside of me, right? It's something outside of consciousness. And consciousness, by the way, is a cognitive act. It's a value apprehension, as Hildebrand says in the Ethics, chapter 17. And he's very adamant about that. So, right, we avoid this problem of Hume that it discloses, that he says it's just sentiment, so it discloses nothing in reality. With Hildebrand, we have it's actually a conscious activity because we're frontally conscious of it, right? So it's a cognitive act, it's value apprehension, so it discloses something of reality, and it's something outside of us. So it has to be something objectively independent of us, hence Hildebrand calls it a value. And if you're not familiar with that kind of terminology, I made a video on an introduction to value philosophy and what that means for Dietrich von Hildebrand. But essentially it means important in itself, independent of us. So I don't have to be present or be conscious of the beautiful person or the beautiful painting or the beautiful landscape for it to be beautiful. No, it's beautiful independent of my experiencing of it. So with those in mind, Hildebrand posits then, it seems evident, does it not, that beauty is objective, that beauty is actually something profoundly mysterious, but something very much good. And Hildebrand talks about this in an essay, Beauty in the Light of Redemption, of its role, not just for humans, but its dignified role in the Christian life, which I think is something wonderful that Hildebrand states. And honestly, I don't think it's talked about enough, but He even talks about it in Aesthetics Volume 1, talks about the idea of how beauty changes and transforms the person, and it changes the environment. He uses examples. I believe it's Spain that he talks about, its natural landscape and how it transforms the people and their attitude. Whereas if you take these places where they eliminate natural beauty, it highly affects their attitude. So Hildebrand does a wonderful job in aesthetics and talking about the nature of beauty. But now I'm digressing at this point. Perhaps I'll just make a video on Hildebrand's aesthetics. But that is Hildebrand's argument for why beauty is objective. It's independent of us. We can't have lateral consciousness of it. And it's something, right, that we are conscious though. So it's a cognitive act. So it's something disclosed to us in reality. So I hope this video helps. I hope it convinces you that beauty is objective. I personally think Hildebrand's right. But if you don't, let me know what you think about it. And let me know what you think about Hume's argument if you want. I'd be very curious to hear about it. But that's all I have for you today, and God bless.